Have you guys ever had an experience with a film where, upon first watch, you don't seem to really like it or enjoy it as much as maybe others do, but then once you rewatch it, turns out you end up loving it? Well, that was certainly the case with this one. What is going on, my horror fans and friends? It is your boy Woodsboro Fanatic, and we are back with day 21 of my horror movie challenge, watching and reviewing a film I have never seen before. Today's film is Late Night with the Devil, a 2024 release directed by Cameron and Colin Cairness and starring the wonderful Dave Dastmalchian. Now, obviously, I'm late on in this review, but this was a film that, again, I felt benefited from more than one watch, and I'm glad I did because I felt it was necessary to get a clear understanding about how I felt about this movie. And upon rewatch, I enjoyed it way more than I did watching it in the theaters. The premise of the film centers around a live television broadcast that aired in 1977 on Halloween night. And this broadcast ends up taking a turn for the worst. And up until now, the events of that broadcast were never shown or released to the public. But now that they are, we get to take a look at what actually happened that night, as well as some behind the scenes footage of those events. This film places emphasis on the culture of the 70s and the satanic panic wave that was going on throughout the 70s and early 80s, which I thought was a very unique element to bring into the movie. Definitely fitting, as you can see with the title. But to tap into that sort of aspect of culture at that time, I thought was um, very intriguing, and again, it just added a different flavor to this film overall. Speaking of the 70s, this film absolutely excels with its 70s aesthetic, all the way from the costume designs, the set designs, the grainy cinematography aspect ratios that we get, the framing, the soundtrack and the score. Everything about this screams 70s, and they definitely capitalize on giving you that feel of a late night talk show, especially back in that period of time. That aesthetic is absolutely the number one thing that this film has going for it. While there are so many other elements of the film to appreciate, the color grading and the aesthetic that we get is just something to marvel at. It's so unique, and that alone makes this one of the more entertaining films of the year. Dave Dastmalchian puts on a great performance as the lead, as the host of this late night talk show, and he proves once again why he deserves to absolutely be getting more roles, especially in the horror genre. He is just such a captivating talent, and he's just one of those actors where any film that he's a part of, I automatically have intrigue towards. I read a little bit about the preparation that he went into for this role, and I appreciate his commitment towards it. He definitely embodies the personality of a late night talk show host. He said he did a lot of studying on, former talk show hosts, and again, it's definitely prevalent here. He does an absolutely wonderful job. The rest of the cast complements Dave perfectly with their performances as well. In particular, the skeptic of the group. First of all, just a very convincing performance, and I thought he brought a very compelling contrast to the situation where, as the skeptic, he seems to be the only person in the room who's not believing any of the things that are taking place. He thinks it's all bullshit, regardless of how severe things seem to get, regardless of how real shit seems to get. So I thought it was a very entertaining and intriguing aspect from a character standpoint. The direction of this film really gives us some cool experiences where we get to follow the production crew backstage, and we kind of just get a feel for that experience of what it's like behind the scenes in a talk show. I thought that was a very interesting perspective, very refreshing, something we've never seen before. There's a lot of aspects to this film that are original, inventive, and creative, and I thought of all of them, this in particular, these backstage sequences were probably some of my favorite. The directors also do a marvelous job at giving us multiple different styles of filmmaking visually, and each visual style provides its own sense of life to the film. Throughout the runtime of the film, we get a mix of different aesthetics from different eras. In the backstage sequences that I was just speaking on, they give us a classic visual style of filmmaking where it's all in black and white, which is really fucking dope. And then when we get to the sequences of the actual talk show, we get that 70s grain found footage feel. And then towards the back half of the film, particularly the last act, it goes to more of a modern visual filmmaking look. And I just thought that the way they were able to implement all three styles of filmmaking throughout this film was just so impressive. For the most part, the practical and CGI effects are put to good use. I think the CGI gets a bit outlandish towards the back half of the film in one scene in particular with the little girl, but I thought that the use of effects from practical and CGI were very fitting towards the overall style and aesthetic of the film. From a writing standpoint, I thought this was well executed commentary on the lengths that people will go to achieve a certain level of success and the prices that they may ultimately pay along the way. My only gripe with this film is the way it ends. It leaves off on a sort of ambiguous note where, as an audience, you're left with more questions than answers. And while that's not necessarily a direction that is always bad in horror films, I think this movie was so straightforward with its story, and as a viewer, you get a pretty good understanding of where things are going. At least you think. So when they take this left turn in that final act, and things just get trippy and convoluted and just off the wall, it leaves a bit of a sour taste in your mouth. And I think maybe some people might be able to interpret the ending better than I was. Some people may be able to come up with the answers that I definitely couldn't figure out, but that's something that you should definitely be mindful of when watching this, but definitely still check this out nonetheless. Like most movies this year, this isn't one that I would necessarily recommend to everybody, and that's specifically due to its pacing. It is a bit slower, but that's because it's taken its time to build its characters and its story, which is something I'm always going to gravitate towards. That's my type of movie. But if you're someone who enjoys 70s horror, if you are someone who enjoys just different styles of filmmaking, if you are someone who enjoys independent horror, if you are someone who, again, just appreciates the behind the scenes and the artistry that goes into making these horror movies, this is absolutely one that deserves the recognition. This is absolutely one that you need to watch.